Hello World Doll Day followers. I'm Kathy Turner. I'm going to be talking to you today for the 5 days of Christmas celebration about another China manufacturer, this time in Germany. I've been researching the company of Dressel and Kister, and yes, there's two. We start out in 1835 when there was a factory in Schieb-Alsbach, which is a region of Thuringia near Rudolstadt. And it was sold to a Mr. Dressel and Johann Kister in 1844. And they were pretty much making dolls starting from about that time. So starting about that time, we have some really magnificent China dolls. And this is probably one of the more primo examples that you might find. She's a large girl. She has 2 sole holes in front and back. She has a beautiful bun coiled in back. And one of the characteristics of the painting of these heads is they have what we call 2-tone eyebrows. I don't know if you can tell, but there's like a lighter gray as well as a black line there. Like they painted it twice with the same brush. It's subtle, but it's there. She has highly blushed cheeks as well. They must have been especially proud of this particular doll. While it doesn't bear
Can I point out something, Kathy?
Yes.
I believe that in order to do that 2-tone, that is 2 separate fires.
It could well be 2 separate firings.
Which, if you think about that, it's a very subtle thing to
It
have
is.
that.
It is. But a distinguishing mark of this particular
quality.
Yeah. This particular one, as I started to say, they must have been especially proud of, because if you look inside, all the markings, this is uncommon to have this much. Now, these are production marks, and they are not identifying the particular factory. You have a red mark, which is probably from the painter's tick mark. And then you also have an incised mark, which is hard to see, which is probably just a size number 14. But then over top of that, you basically have a signature, which I've rarely ever seen anything like that. So I don't know what the story behind that was, but they must have thought this was special. And I think she's special too. She's gorgeous. This is a very small example, but some different model, but slightly similar, which also has a coiled bun. But even though this one is in such a small size, I think maybe you can tell the facial similarity in the modeling between these two heads.
And the China paint is identical, so they're not mixing up a different batch.
No, I don't think so. So these are probably from concurrent about the same time period, maybe 1850 up to about 1850s or so.
Wonderful.
And really beautiful work. And they went on to make others that were a little bit more plebeian. You know, they had your standard flat tops and so forth and so on. They had a fairly large product line. But back to the family that was running this company, I mentioned Johann Kister. Now, he had 2 children. He had a son and he had a daughter. So he gave the factory in Schieb-Alsbach to his son, who promptly renamed it after himself, AWFR Kister. So it went from being called Dressel and Kister to AWFR Kister. So he took over that company. And then his daughter, on the other hand, you have to remember Papa Kister. He wanted to set his daughter up and make sure she was taken care of for life. So he went and he bought another factory in Passau, and he married his daughter off to his business partner and sent them off to run the factory in Passau. His business partner, unfortunately, being much older than his daughter, he lasted about a year before he died, and that left his daughter a very wealthy widow in Passau owning a China porcelain factory. Well, wealthy widows don't stay widows for very long, and she went and found herself a new husband. And I'm just catching up here with my names here.
Johann, they're all named
Johann.
No,
he was not named Johann, although, you know, a lot of them were. No, her first husband was Jacob Stark, and then she married Wilhelm Lenk.
Okay, they're either Johann or Wilhelm.
Wilhelm is the other one. Yes, you're right. So she married a Wilhelm Lenk, and they had two sons, one of which was Adolf, and he inherited the Passau factory. And he married a woman named Lena. Now, I know this is all this long family. Where am I going with this? Lena Lenk. So now we're up into getting to the end of the 1800s or so, into the 1900s. Well, Lena's husband Adolf also passed away, leaving her a wealthy widow. So now she's running the Passau factory, completely independent at this time, and still called Dressel and Kister. Independent. Meanwhile, back in Schieb-Alsbach, the other company is completely separate now. It's related family-wise, but separate factories. And the widow Lena is running the factory in Passau. And now we go to their products. And here's some of what they were producing. Very different at this time. These are the early 1900 models. So the question is, where did these come from? In other words, who sculpted them? Well, Lena hired a gentleman named Filippo Cifarelli. And he was from Naples, Italy, and he was a famous sculptor. Now, the reason she was able to get him is because he had wife troubles. He had married a French woman who was this gorgeous French chanteuse, who was so beautiful that she had many admirers, and he was a very jealous husband. So he whisked his wife away to Germany to get her away from all of her admirers. And she got bored there, and she persuaded her husband to let her go to the Americas to further her singing career, which didn't work out so well. And so his wife, Filippo's wife, her name was Maria, came back to Germany, and he finished up doing the work he could for Lena Lenk, and then whisked her back off to Italy. Now, I kind of wonder, while Maria was in the Americas and Filippo was in Germany with the widow Lena, there's some pictures of her posing on a podium as though modeling for Filippo, and I kind of wonder what was going on there, but I have no idea.
You have no idea.
I have no idea.
It's just a rumor.
It's just a rumor. But there is more to the story. Unfortunately, Filippo and Maria go back to Italy, and she gets going again with her paramours, and he catches them, and he ends up shooting her and killing her, and there's a big trial, and he is absolved of all guilt because it was completely reasonable that a jealous husband would kill his wife, apparently, at that time. So that happened. But the result was this beautiful dolls. And there's speculation, again, a rumor, that perhaps some of the modeling might have also been from his beautiful French wife that he ended up killing, because she was gorgeous, and he may have used her to some extent as a model as well. And I want to show you some things about these. These are half dolls. These are not half dolls, rather. These are shoulder heads, but they made a lot of half dolls in China and in Bisque. And one of the characteristics of the China ones, if you can close up on the hair.
Oh, the details. Wonderful.
You see the striations in there?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the only other company I know of prior to this that did this was Meissen, way back at the start of porcelain. They did that same hair treatment. And here we are, many, many years later, it being picked up again by Dressel and Kister. And look at the modeling of this shoulder plate.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's got the bust, you got the musculature of the back, and beautiful face. I mean, they're gorgeous. If these are his work, and I'm sure they had other sculptors too, but he was the big name that they brought over from Italy. So I'm sure he had his hand in some of these. They're just gorgeous. And look at the hands. I had to bring a pair of the hands.
Yeah, they really are fantastic.
And they did do some in bisque also. You don't see the same work in the painting of the hair on the bisque. Maybe that detail just didn't work as well in that material. I'm not sure. I assume that this feature here was probably applied because you couldn't do that No, it would have to be done separately and applied. Now I want to show you the marks that they used. That blue mark, it's like a shepherd's crook. They call it a bishop's crozier. That's the typical Dressel and Kister mark. You'll find it in both of them.
Now, but this mark would be on the later pieces, correct?
As far as I know, I haven't found any earlier pieces. In fact, there's kind of a gap. I don't know what kind of doll production Dressel and Kister might have had towards the latter quarter of the 1800s. I don't know. What kind of overlap there might have been, how closely connected the factories remained, I am uncertain about. I just know they were separate businesses by this point in time. And Lena had to eventually sell the factory to, I think, Rudolstadt, and, to Volkstetter, excuse me. And they continued in business up until basically World War II.
And that's when all of it pretty much all
went
disappears
away, unfortunately. But here we have their beautiful products.
These their later pieces, these are available, and I think they are a good little buy for the workmanship.
These are phenomenal quality. I mean, you could put this one next to a Meissen and look at the quality and see that these were, look at how thin that porcelain is too.
And if someone is very clever, I think I've seen more of these just as heads than full figures, but if someone was clever, they could really do some wonderful bodies for them. And
I do have some that are on the bodies. Unfortunately, I didn't have the room to bring them, but they typically have a very firmly stuffed cloth torso that will taper down to a small waist. And then they're sometimes mounted on a almost like a pincushion base or an open skirt base. I've also had some that were put on full figures. I have one that's seated in a chair and has lower legs as well. But they're posed more like figurines than they are play dolls. These earlier dolls from Kister, were made to be play dolls more than these were not for adults to sit on their dressers.
Which these pieces here were.
These pieces are made for your lady's boudoir.
Decorative arts.
Decorative arts. And this is the Munich art doll era also. This is when artists were being brought into play to create artist dolls. So these relate to this era.
Well, super. I learned so much from you, Kathy.
Well, I hope that you can take something away from this, and maybe you'll find some of these treasures under your own Christmas tree.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.